The imperial palace of Vexithorian hung suspended between three moons, its crystalline spires piercing the violet atmosphere like frozen lightning. Within its obsidian halls, silence had become a suffocating presence. For 17 cycles, Empress Melissa had not emerged from the morning chamber, and the entire draconic imperium held its breath. The dragon Empress was a being of terrible magnificence. Even in her humanoid form, scales of midnight blue shimmered beneath her translucent skin, and her eyes, ancient golden orbs that had witnessed the birth and death of stars, now held only emptiness. Her mate, Emperor Zarketh, had fallen in the Battle of the Crimson Nebula, defending their empire from the Void Swarm. His death had shattered something fundamental in Melissa, something that transcended mere grief. The palace staff moved like ghosts, terrified of disturbing the mourning sovereign. Her advisors stood outside the sealed chamber doors, whispering desperately among themselves. General Krikstar, a war-scarred dragon whose scales bore the marks of 1,000 battles, paced with growing agitation. 17 cycles, he growled, his voice a rumble of distant thunder. The Empire needs her. The Void Swarm regroups at our borders, and our Empress weeps alone. You dare approach her in this state? Hissed Chancellor Velmara, her serpentine form coiling nervously. She incinerated the last messenger who entered. His ashes still stain the threshold. Then we are doomed, Krikstar said flatly. They did not notice the human janitor who pushed his cleaning cart past them. Burak was unremarkable by any measure the galaxy cared about. He stood at average height for a human, with dark hair perpetually disheveled and eyes that held a quiet sadness of their own. He had arrived on Vexithorian 3 years ago, one of the few humans employed in the Imperial Palace, a novelty really, since humans were considered a primitive species barely worthy of galactic citizenship. But Burak was good at his job. He cleaned thoroughly, arrived early, left late, and most importantly, went unnoticed. In a palace full of beings who could level cities with a thought, invisibility was survival. He had also lost someone once, a wife, to a disease that ravaged the outer colonies before the Imperium's medical ships arrived. He understood the weight of absence, the way grief could turn your bones to lead and your breath to broken glass. So when he reached the morning chamber, he didn't hesitate. He simply opened the door and walked inside. The chamber was vast, designed to accommodate a dragon in full form. Melissa sat in the center, small and humanoid, surrounded by scorched floor where her anguish had manifested as flame. The air shimmered with barely contained energy, the temperature hot enough to make the walls glow faintly red. She didn't look up as Burak entered. She didn't incinerate him either. He set down his cart, pulled out a cloth, and began to clean. Not the scorch marks, those felt sacred somehow, but the dust that had accumulated in the corners, the neglected spaces that existed even in grief. An hour passed, then 2. Finally Melissa spoke, her voice rough from disuse. You are either the bravest fool in the galaxy or the most ignorant. Probably both, Your Majesty, Burak replied, continuing his work. I could kill you without thought. Your species is fragile, temporary. Yes, ma'am. Another silence. Then more quietly, why are you here? Burak paused, wringing out his cloth. Because everyone else is too afraid. And because, he hesitated, because I know what it's like to lose someone and have the whole world expect you to be okay before you're ready. Melissa's golden eyes finally lifted to meet his. In them he saw millennia of memories, love that had burned across ages and a pain so profound it could swallow suns. Your kind lives such brief lives. How could you possibly understand? Maybe because our lives are brief, Burak said, sitting down on the floor a respectful distance away. We understand better than anyone that every moment matters. Every loss cuts deeper because we have so few moments to begin with. He looked at his hands. I lost my wife 4 years ago. I still set out 2 cups for morning coffee sometimes. The Empress stared at him, something flickering in those ancient eyes. What was her name? Aishi. And you? Continue? What choice do I have? Burak smiled sadly. She would have been angry if I stopped living just because she couldn't anymore. Told me so actually before the end. Melissa's form shuddered, scales rippling across her skin. Zarketh said something similar. In his final transmission, he said, her voice cracked. He said I must burn brighter, not burn out. Tears fell then, not water but liquid light that sizzled against the floor. Burak didn't move away from the heat. He simply sat, a small human presence in the vastness of draconic grief. "I don't know how," Melissa whispered. "Neither did I," Burak admitted. "But I woke up the next day anyway, and the day after that. Eventually, the days started to hurt less. Not because I loved her less, but because carrying her memory became different, lighter somehow." The Empress closed her eyes. When she opened them again, something had shifted. Not healing, not yet. But perhaps the first acknowledgement that healing might someday be possible. "Your species," she said slowly, "is very strange. We've been told that, ma'am, you face oblivion with every generation, yet you persist. You love knowing you will lose. You build knowing it will crumble." She tilted her head. "Perhaps that is not weakness." "Perhaps," Burak agreed. Melissa stood, her form expanding slightly, scales glinting in the dim light. "I will not forget this, human janitor. You showed courage where my greatest warriors showed fear. I just cleaned some floors." "Your Majesty." "No." Her voice resonated with ancient power, but also with something new, or perhaps something remembered. "You reminded an immortal Empress that even the briefest life can teach wisdom. That is no small thing." She walked toward the door, pausing at the threshold. "What is your name?" "Burak, ma'am." "Burak," she tested the word. "When I rebuild what grief has broken, I will remember the human who sat with a dragon in the dark." The door opened. The advisors stumbled back in shock as their Empress emerged. Her eyes still red with mourning but burning now with purpose. Behind her, Burak quietly returned to his cleaning cart. Sometimes, the galaxy didn't need warriors or weapons. Sometimes it just needed someone willing to sit beside grief and wait for the morning. And humans, it turned out, were very good at that.